Heroes of the Storm was supposed to be Blizzard's answer to the MOBA phenomenon that started in their own backyard, born out of Blizzard's own Warcraft III. Watching the success of Riot's League of Legends and Valve's Dota 2 must have felt like an opportunity they let slip through their fingers. Don't get me wrong, during League and Dota's rise, World of Warcraft was the biggest it had been, raking in millions for Blizzard. Still, it's hard not to feel like food was left on the table, and Blizzard decided to dig in. The development of Blizzard's MOBA had a rocky start. Originally called Blizzard Dota, it began with copyright disputes between Valve and Blizzard. Eventually, it was decided that Blizzard owned Defense of the Ancients and Valve owned Dota. Blizzard decided to rename their MOBA Blizzard All-Stars, before finally landing on Heroes of the Storm. Earlier media attention was focused on the legal dispute, but as more critics and media got to see the game's early development, it became clear that HOTS was unique and approached the MOBA scene from a different angle. The matches were shorter, there would be multiple maps or battlegrounds that contained distinct objectives. This was a stark difference from the established MOBA formula of one map and one objective. Further, there was a strong focus on team play, as experience was shared between team members. There was no individual gold or item shop. The game felt more streamlined and accessible. Additionally, the game would be filled with Blizzard's iconic characters. It seemed like HOTS had cast a wide net that would interest a large audience. Heroes finally released after a lengthy alpha and beta period, and it felt like a very muted celebration. Blizzard makes big splashes when they release games, especially a new IP, but that didn't really happen with HOTS. It just kind of phased out of beta. Maybe it's just because so many people had been playing before its release that it didn't feel as flashy, or perhaps it was a conscious decision. Still, it left people saying, "Is this it? Okay, cool, I guess." Regardless of the lack of release splash, Blizzard had big plans with HOTS, specifically their esports scene. Blizzard threw a lot quickly and early at the HOTS esports scene, possibly to catch up to League and Dota, both of which had already spent years establishing tournaments and leagues. Blizzard announced the Heroes of the Storm Global Championship Circuit, an international league that would begin months after HOTS' release. The HGC would have a prize pool of $1.6 million. In addition to the professional league, they would have an amateur league called Heroes of the Dorm, where players would be playing for tuition money. Blizzard went as far as securing broadcasting on ESPN for their collegiate league. It was clear that Blizzard was going after the MOBA esports market in a big way. Despite being late to the party, they intended to be as big a competitor in the space as Riot and Valve. If you're thinking, this seems brave considering HOTS hadn't even been out for a full year, you're right. But if any developer could make such a bold move, it's a heavy hitter like Blizzard. And it seemed that throwing their weight behind HGC was working. The first season seemed promising, attracting big organizations like Evil Genius, Fnatic and Cloud9, who took the first grand prize. However, as big as Blizzard's splash was compared to other esports' first season, it also magnified some issues. First was the HGC itself. To give amateur teams a chance, the two teams at the bottom of the league would face relegation. This meant there was a considerable risk to organizations joining in. If a team had a poor season, they would lose their spot in the league. If a team couldn't play in the league, they wouldn't make any money and can't sustain themselves. Add the fact that the scene and game was so new, nobody really knew what HOTS esport would turn into, as it was still developing. Because of this, many organizations chose not to join, such as Na'Vi and Virtus Pro. And after the initial season, organizations' worst fear were confirmed. After winning the championship, Cloud9 failed to qualify for the next tournament and dropped the team from the organization altogether. Next were the issues with the game itself. Due to its streamlined, more accessible design, the lack of items meant that heroes didn't evolve throughout the game the same way they do in League or Dota. This limited the theory crafting and experimentation the teams could do, which meant metas were figured out very quickly, and there wasn't much that anyone could do until there was a patch. For lack of a better term, HOTS was a solved game, and it became stale to spectators. I feel like I'm sugarcoating all of this, but putting it bluntly, the game was designed to be accessible and streamlined to reach a broad audience. Because of this, the skill ceiling is simply lower than other MOBAs, which led to predictable and dull games for spectators, and the viewership reflected that. Finally was the emphasis on team play. As unique as a concept as this was for a MOBA, the shared XP, the lack of individual gold, created a scenario where you couldn't have standout flashy players, which is something that fans desperately want. People want to watch and cheer for simple, artsy faker. The lack of personalities to rally or hate also meant that there weren't really stories to follow in the scene. Anyone who watched OG Cinderella run at TI8 knows how impactful a good story can be.
Your grand champions of TI8! It's OG!
Despite the massive backing from Blizzard, the scene was not reaching the same numbers as its competitors. To be clear, the viewership was not terrible, averaging between 10,000 and 20,000 for their tournaments. In a normal situation where a game naturally develops as a competitive scene, third-party organizers would have been happy with the numbers they received. But for the amount of money that Blizzard was throwing at the scene, it was clear they expected more. But it was still early. The scene was still developing. No one knew for sure what the esport will turn into. It was natural to go through growing pains, and the scene did see year after year growth, with 2018 being the best year for HOTS esport yet. Their views increased, and it seemed like Heroes of the Storm would settle as this unique alternative MOBA. Unfortunately, Blizzard had other ideas. On December 13th, 2018, in a single blog post, without warning to players or community members, Blizzard cancelled the Heroes of the Storm Global Championship circuit. Pro players, managers, tournament organizers all lost their jobs. Initially, this can look like a drastic overreaction from Blizzard, but upon closer inspection, it makes sense. While many esports scene had to go through these growing pains, no other esport had spent as much as Blizzard to back their scene so early. And what was spent by Valve or Riot originally, they were able to do so freely. Riot and Valve are not publicly traded companies like Blizzard Activision is. There isn't a board of investors that gets to look through their expenses and question what was spent. 2018 was also a hard year at Blizzard with multiple layoffs. After a rough year, Blizzard looked at its costs, its profit, and HGC was discontinued. But if there's one indisputable fact about gamers, it's that we're a passionate bunch. Despite the devastating blow of Blizzard cancelling the official Heroes Pro scene, the passion of its fans drove the esport forward. In 2020, a community-driven event began to emerge. Heroes Hearth Community Clash League, run by influencers in the community, took the reins. CCL had its first outing in 2020, and initial numbers are good. A peak of 8,600 views and an average of 5,000 watching the league with a prize pool of $20,000. Compared to what the HGC had, these are obviously worse, but the CCL was running everything on a more sustainable budget. Ian Anderson of the CCL management team stating, "Honestly, we have already surpassed my personal goals in terms of viewership and community engagement. It has been awesome and we've had an incredible time making the league." CCL saw a second season where community donations rose the prize pool to $33,600 and a peak viewership of 14,642 viewers. It is currently in the group stages of its third season, with 8 teams totaling 48 players. The community-run scene seems to be progressing well. This feels like a good fit for Heroes. It would have been nice to have Blizzard's bank account help run the esports scene, but I don't think they ever would have been able to compete with League and Dota, not only due to its design and format, but they were simply too late. MOBA fans had already settled with their desired MOBA in an esports scene years ahead of the HGC. It's one challenge to develop your esports scene from the ground up and have fans grow a passion for the scene as it matures. It's another challenge entirely to convince those passionate fans to leave their current scene for a brand new one. CCL is still young, and some will never call it successful. But for as long as there are passionate people in HOTS wanting to participate and spectate the highest level of their passion, there will be a Heroes of the Storm esports scene.
Oh my god, we have again Arcana with a play attempt, but it's not enough. They're still fighting. It's 5 versus 4. They're looking for this, and